Series, and we are going through a case study, a fictional case study, where we're preparing or we're designing an intervention to resolve an access to finance constraints for women-owned micro enterprises. We spoke extensively about what the problem is, and we now move into the logic of our change. And in that logic, we explained that it's important for us to understand what the current state is and have a vision for our future state. And the logic is then what takes us from the current state to the future state. And yesterday we spoke about what market systems we are going to select to deal or resolve the constraints that we've identified, or the problem that we have identified. I decided on choosing technical services market systems because it's more cost effective and it's a whole lot more as a trend in terms of growth in productivity and profitability. So the extent to which the infrastructure required penetrates developing nations, and where most of our women-owned micro enterprises are, has been really greatly increased in the last few years. So today then, what we're focusing on is the incentives and triggers. Now, incentives and triggers to bring in a private sector partner to work with us to increase the access to finance, credit finance specifically, for our women-owned enterprises. Now, as you all know, and as we've been talking about in the series, market system development focuses on engaging with the private sector and private businesses to drive the changes that is required to increase or to reduce poverty. So, and the way we do that is to present to the market or to the private sector partners incentives and triggers. So as a professional, as a market systems professional, it's important to understand the difference between incentives and triggers. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I would not speak specifically about the incentives that I have chosen and the triggers that I think will be more useful in this episode. Hopefully in later episode we'll cover that. So, as usual, in my mind map, what you can see on your screen are the steps that we've gone through: current state, future state, and the logic of getting us from the current state to the future state. And that logic includes signpost. I discovered a wonderful signposting tool that a lady called Anne Marie Brown, I'll put her name and LinkedIn link in the comments in this description section below. She continuously demystify the signposting that is required to help us walk through our logic. And the other thing I spoke about is the activity sequence. It's important for us to determine this in advance of the implementation. We then went on to talk about the systems which we spoke about yesterday. Which exact system are we going to select to drive the change that we require? Now, incentives and trigger is what will bring private sector partner to work with us. Now, as you know, most private businesses are there to make money. We have to present them with the reason why they should join us in modifying the way they do business so our beneficiary can be included. but it is not their primary reason of being in business. So therefore, we have to present to them the reasons that they should join us in this intervention. So typically, when we speak of incentives, we're talking about market-based incentives. So increase in customer base, revenue stream, market share, visibility, lowering cost. All of those are incentives that we present to market actors. But incentives are not enough. As everybody knows, we're supposed to eat healthily. We're not supposed to smoke, but we do those things in the clear understanding or awareness of the harm that it causes us. So we have an incentive because it will make us ill if we continue to eat or smoke in this way. But we don't do it. But then something triggers an action, a behavioral change to eating a bit more healthily. And usually it's a shock. It's some sort of shock to the system. If there's a health crisis, for instance, the likeliness is that the doctor will recommend a healthier behavior, and you will change it because of that particular crisis. And the current situation we're in, the COVID-19 public health crisis, has changed the way people behave, changed the way people attend to their personal hygiene. So it's the same sort of trigger we have to look for as market systems development professional implementing an intervention with a private sector partner. We have to understand what triggers behavioral change in those partners. We have to fully understand how to use the trigger to encourage behavioral change. It is, however, important here that I make it clear that this is not manipulating the private sector, because it's a whole lot easier for them to spot that they're being manipulated. What this is really using trigger points that can be really useful and that they will find particularly compelling to make this happen. So the first trigger point I note here is company value proposition. We have to fully understand what the value proposition is and how we can help the company or the private sector partner achieve, promote, expand the value proposition that it has with its customer. If we're moving the partner to include beneficiaries or customer base that ordinarily the partner is not ready for, we have to present a compelling case how our beneficiary fits into the company's value proposition. Otherwise, we look for a company that's better fitted to our primary objective. So it's important then, as professionals, as market system development professionals, to fully understand what value proposition is and how to use that value proposition as a trigger point to encourage behavioral change in the company. So what you see here, function, gain, and pain, generally, that's the component of value proposition. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go through the definition of those, but I think in the description section, I explain quite a bit what those are. Now, tension, to create a tension. So the triggers falls into two categories in my view. So you have the value proposition and then you have the tension. The tension really creates, more likely triggers action. Here we have other market actor involvement. In some circumstances, you can get a behavioral change in a private sector partner, in a business, if you bring another actor into your intervention. imagine telephone networks. The presence of telephone networks in rural area in developing nations has resulted in more internet services, internet-based services being established in these rural areas. So that's one tension that can be created. The other tension is access to opportunities. So government very often have initiatives and a design incentive to bring private sector actors into particular market or into particular location. Now, the access to those incentives or access to even influence government to design incentive that suits the companies or the private sector actors, this attention that can be created, that can be used cleverly by an MSD professional to get the private sector to be a lot more involved in changing the lot of our beneficiaries. Influence. Very often, most of these private sector actors want to influence the development and the progress that happens within a particular sector. And if we fully understand this and how this can work in the market systems that we have selected, it is then possible to trigger a behavioral change. So the combination of incentives and trigger will lead private sector actors to work with you